What's up, explorers? Welcome back to our channel. We're the Choose here from Choose to Explore, where we teach you guys how to see the world
and save $1.
So we just came from an amazing bucket list trip to none other than Japan. And throughout our 7 days, we visited so many different regions. We went through Tokyo, Mount Fuji, Nara, Osaka, and Kyoto.
So in this video, we're going to give you our top 29 tips that you need to know before you go to Japan.
So stay tuned. You don't want to miss this one.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to get into is when's the best time to visit Japan. So the first thing you need to know about that is that Japan experiences all 4 seasons. There's summer, winter, spring, and fall.
And depending on what your interests are, that will really dictate when the best time for you to go to Japan. So the most popular time to visit Japan is definitely during Sakura season or the cherry blossom season. Now this season changes slightly year to year depending on the environmental conditions, but it's typically somewhere in the end of March, early April for about 2 weeks.
So in the summertime, it's actually a lot more hot and more humid in Japan, and there's also risk for heavier rains during that time. So keep that in mind. So we actually visited in the fall, which has cooler temperatures in the summer and is also less humid. And also, even though there's no cherry blossom season during that time, the beautiful leaves were a different color, orange and red, and that was really nice to see too.
Definitely an amazing time for beautiful fall foliage. And lastly, there is winter, and typically in Japan, it is cold. You will see snow sometimes. Bring a winter coat and be ready to be bundled up.
And one thing to note is that Japan is very popular to visit all throughout the year.
And one thing that we did notice throughout our journey in Japan is there was a lot of people everywhere that we went.
So now we're going to go over where should you fly into when you're headed to Japan. So there are 2 main international airports that are near Tokyo, and that's Haneda as well as Narita.
So Haneda is going to be closer to the city center, only being about 9 miles south of the city. And using the Kyoku line, I think that's how it's called, we took the train and it took us to the city center in about 30 minutes or so.
So while we were doing our flight searches, we also found flights to Narita Airport, and those were sometimes cheaper than flying into Haneda Airport. However, Narita Airport is also a bit further, so you would have to factor in the cost of public transportation.
So the Narita Airport is about 37 miles east of the city center, so it is a bit further away, but there are 2 main lines you can use to get from the Narita Airport to the city center. So the first one being the Narita Express. So this is a dedicated train service that connects the Narita Airport to major Tokyo stations like Shinjuku, Shibuya, but this one takes around 60 to 90 minutes. Also, they have the KC Skyliner, and this is an express train service that connects the Narita Airport to the Ueno station, and this is approximately 40 to 50 minutes in order to get there.
So next up, we're going to go over the entry requirements as an American.
So entering Japan as an American was easy and really convenient. First being that you did not need any visa requirements in order to enter. The only thing that we needed to do prior is to fill out an online form and have a QR code presented on the time of our arrival.
We have a link to that form in the description below.
So the next thing I'm going to talk about 2 things that typically don't go well together, and that is big cities and safety. So while Tokyo is the most populated city in the world, Japan is one of the safest countries in the world as well.
And you should always be prepared in knowing the emergency number of the country that you're visiting. So it's not going to be 911 if something goes on. It's going to be 110 in Japan.
And you should always be prepared with travel insurance because you never know if something goes wrong. And we personally use Safety Wing. It's usually a little over $1 a day for coverage for whenever we're abroad per person. So we definitely recommend that. And you can see that linked in our description as well. But overall, throughout our whole experience in Japan, we had an amazing time. And day and night, we never felt unsafe. So in Japan, the currency that they use is called the yen. And right now, as an American, it's an amazing time to go and visit because the US dollar is strong in Japan. At the time of this video recording, it's just under 150 yen per 1 US dollar. So see the world, save $1. Your money goes really far here in Japan. So Japan is a very modern country. And throughout our experience in Japan, we predominantly use our credit card for most of our purchases and transactions.
However, we did find that a few more local spots were cash only.
And these are going to be like the street food vendors, the local stalls, or even some different vendors at shrines and things like that.
Yes, so have your Japanese yen prepared. Our next tip will save you on foreign transaction fees while you're in Japan.
So as we just talked about, there are some places where having cash will be more convenient. And exchanging your US dollars to the Japanese yen may give you a bad return on your money.
So one alternative to that would be going straight to the ATM.
So we typically use the Charles Schwab debit card, and this allows us to get reimbursed on ATM fees as well as paying no foreign transaction fees on our debit card. But one thing to note, and this is a pro chew tip, to always deny the conversion. And you'll save money by denying the conversion because you'll actually take your money out as Japanese yen. When you select the conversion, what it's doing is it's taking your money out as US dollars and then it's converting it into Japanese yen. And somewhere along the lines, some money gets lost. I don't know where it goes, but it's not in your account anymore.
So next we're going to talk about the Pasmo card, which looks like this.
So at the airport, we got the Pasmo card because we thought it would be like the Metro card here in New York City. But what we realized is that a Pasmo card is much more than just a Metro card, such as shopping, vending machines, storage lockers, and we just found so many uses for it during our trip. So I highly recommend having this one as well. So the next point is one of the best things coming to Japan as a tourist, and that is tax-free shopping.
So as you're shopping throughout Japan, there are two different prices that could be displayed. One is going to include tax and one does not.
So obviously the one that does not include tax is going to be a lower price, but if you do see those prices, just be sure to ask the sales associate what they mean. Also, if you are paying taxes, be sure to keep all your receipts because at the end of the trip, when you are at the airport, you can find the VAT tax refund place where you can get some of that tax money back to you. Also, I do want to note that some shops, in particular, I remember in Uniqlo that they had different spending requirements in order to get the tax-free shopping. So I think it was something like spend $40 and you don't pay taxes, but if you don't meet that minimum spend, then you are going to pay taxes. And our next point will save you money, especially if you're coming from America where there is a strong tipping culture. And that is, Japan does not have a tipping culture.
So you really shouldn't tip when you're in Japan because they may actually take offense to that.
So this is really surprising coming from America because we typically tip 18 to 22% to everybody. So not being required to tip definitely saved us a lot of money here in Japan.
Now let's get into where you're going to stay when you visit Japan.
So I was doing my research on Tokyo, and especially a lot of people recommend to stay in two different areas, and that is Shinjuku and Harajuku.
Which are both great places to stay, but they can be a little bit more expensive. So if you're looking to save some money, it may not be the most ideal spot for you.
These areas will also be the most populated areas inside your trip in Japan.
So we actually stayed in Taito City, which is a little bit outside of these very populated areas, but the key is to stay nearby a train station. So it was very easy for us to get from point A to point B and get to everywhere that we needed to go. The trains are very well connected. And if you're looking for some of the best recommendations on where to stay for any budget, check out our Explore Japan travel guide, which is linked in the description below.
So the next thing we're going to talk about are storage lockers here in Japan. So one of the most convenient things about Japan are having these storage lockers all over the city. I'm talking about just on the street. I'm talking about in bus stations, Universal Studios, Disney World, almost anywhere where you could think about it, they have storage lockers there in Japan.
And this was especially convenient for us because a lot of the places that we stayed had late check-ins and early checkouts. So what do we do with our bags in the meantime? The storage lockers.
So they have all different storage lockers in different shapes and sizes, and each one of them have different prices as well.
And also, it was very simple to pay for them using our Pasmo card.
If not, please have some Japanese yen in order to pay for these as well.
And now we're going to circle back to the great public transportation in Japan. So traveling through Japan was really easy for us, one of the easiest we've ever been to in the world because of how easy it was to navigate their buses and their train system.
So during our entire experience in Japan, we were able to navigate the country using only public transportation. We did not take one taxi throughout the entire trip. And this brings us right to our next point. There are no Grabs or Ubers in Japan. There are taxis that you can take, but they will be a lot more expensive than taking public transportation.
The next thing we're going to talk about is the Japan Rail Pass, the JR Pass.
So I read a lot of articles about transportation throughout Japan, and almost everybody recommends the JR Pass. But what I would say about our experience through Japan is we saved a lot of money by not doing the JR Pass. So where the JR Pass definitely will save you money is if doing the bullet train is on your bucket list. So where the JR Pass will save you money is if the bullet train is on your bucket list. I mean, going into this trip, I even watched the Bullet Train movie and I was mesmerized by the bullet trains because they're moving so fast. But they are significantly more expensive than any other modes of transportation in Japan. So we used a combination of day passes, online passes, our Pasmo card, and we saved a tremendous amount on transportation. If you want more details on how you can save with transportation throughout Japan, check out our Explore Japan travel guide linked in the description below.
So our next point is something that really surprised the both of us, because when you think of domestic travel within the United States, you might think expensive.
But domestic flights in Japan are significantly cheaper. We did a quick search and we found flights for like $20 to $50, and they're super quick as well. So if you do have a really tight itinerary and you do want to save some money and you want to get there faster than a bullet train, you can take a flight in Japan. So what I recommend before you even get to Japan is to download the offline maps in Google Maps. This will allow you to have a copy of the map to use even when you do not have service throughout Japan. And it was super convenient to use Google Maps throughout our time, especially in Japan, because each train station has its Japanese name, its English name, and the station number as well in Google Maps.
It even tells you what platform to get off of, the times that you'll get there. It was just really incredible, really easy to use.
So I definitely recommend using Google Maps throughout navigating Japan. So while we did say we did not find it necessary to drive throughout Japan because of the great public transportation, if you do have plans to drive in Japan, you definitely need an international driving permit. What we found is through AAA, you can get an international driving permit for $25 before you enter Japan. Also, I know what's a very popular tourist attraction is to do the Mario Karts throughout Tokyo and other cities, but in order to do those, you actually need to have an international driving permit as well. I had a good amount of friends who booked this excursion and later found out that since they did not have an international driving permit, they were not allowed to do the Mario Karting. But not just that, our next point is that they drive on the opposite side in Japan as well. Well, if you are an American. So our next point is the biggest culture shock, not only as an American, but also as a New Yorker, and that is how orderly people are here in Japan. So if you know anything about public transportation, especially in New York, you know you gotta be there like 10-15 minutes before and be prepared to wait about 30 minutes after the time schedule because it's all up to the driver's discretion. Now in Japan, they come on the minute. Matter of fact, they come on the second. As soon as it says 7:38, they are there at 7:38.
So be at that bus stop on time because they will be there.
Also, what's so different than in New York is that people line up in their designated lines in spaces before the train even comes. So as a foreigner, you look crazy just walking right up to the gate and being able to just walk on. You literally have to wait on the sides for the people to come out through the middle. You wait on the side in an orderly fashion, and once they go, you can enter through the middle.
File in accordingly.
So amazing to see because I never would imagine this in New York. The next part is how nobody jaywalks. Like, it would be like 3 o'clock in the morning. Liv and I are out. There's nobody on the road. It has a stop walking sign. Like, everybody in New York is crossing the street if nobody's out. But literally, if it is not green with a person walking on the sign, nobody will walk.
At any hour of any day.
I understand that that's what you're supposed to do, but I've never seen that before. So even though Japan is the most populated city in the world, you're outside and there's no noise.
There's crowds, but there is no noise.
So everybody's respectful of the other person and nobody's yelling at each other. Nobody's on their phones. It's just a great thing to be around Japanese culture.
Yes, nobody wants to hear your phone conversation on the bus or the train or anywhere.
Nobody got a big boombox on their shoulder. It's amazing.
And also a really cool thing was whenever you go to the restaurant, there's usually a spot on the side of the table to hang your bag.
Not just that, sometimes they had a dedicated tray on the side of the table where you can put it in so nobody's bag is on the floor.
Also, whenever you're doing a transaction, the money is not to be placed in the person's hands. Ultimately, you're going to be placing it in a tray, sliding it to them, and then they'll take it off of the tray. You're not going to place money in somebody else's hands. And not only was Japan extremely orderly, Japan is extremely clean.
So I know a lot of people find clean as a basic standard, but we're from New York. So every time I go somewhere and it's clean, I'm blown away by it.
I'm impressed because how is such a big city so clean? Like, why can't New York do the same?
But honestly, Japan is beyond clean. It is spotless. If I drop something on the floor, I just might eat it in Japan. So if you're out in the public, you will notice that nobody eats when they're out, and especially nobody eats while they're walking and in public transportation.
Yes, it's not even allowed. Like, you cannot do that.
Something that also is unique is that there are no trash cans out in the street. So if you have garbage, you literally have to hold your garbage and go from one place to the next. Also, when you enter different establishments, they may ask you to take off your shoes. And in many places, they actually give you a pair of slippers to put on while you're in Japan.
So of course we can't not mention the bidets in Japan. So we actually have bidets here at home, but the bidets in Japan are on a different level. They are different.
So the bidets in Japan are heated, they play music, they do flushing sounds, they do everything that you could imagine and more. I think I may have to go to Japan again and bring a bidet back home. And our next point is about eating in Japan, in particular, the amazing cuisine here in Japan. And we had some amazing dining experience throughout our time in Japan. And if you don't want to take our word from it, Japan has the most Michelin-starred restaurants out of any country in the world. So one thing of note is that a lot of things in Japan are meat and pork based.
So for me, I'm basically a vegetarian, so it was a little bit tougher for me to find certain foods while I was in Japan, but they did exist. There were some vegetarian and vegan options, and we have those included in our Explore Japan travel guide linked below.
One thing that also was surprising to me in Japan is the combinations between foods. So there were a lot of unorthodox things that didn't sound good on paper, but I'm an adventurous eater and I tried them. And a lot of the things, let me tell you, went very well together in Japan. So they got something going on that I wasn't thinking about, but I'm happy that they got it. So one example, I had a pulled pork and deviled egg sandwich that I ate almost every single morning. I got it just because it was such an interesting mix. And it was so good. I had it almost every single morning in Japan. In America, I know I got to get liver coffee, preferably by 9 o'clock in the morning.
Before that.
But in Japan, a lot of cafes don't open till like 11 or 12 o'clock. So it is going to be a little bit more difficult to get your morning coffee there in Japan.
Unless you're going to a convenience store, which is open at all hours of the day.
So convenience stores in Japan are different than any other place that I've ever been to in my life. 7-Eleven Japan is not like 7-Eleven in New York. They have so many different food options and you can get a real full-blown meal and it's inexpensive as well. Being that I didn't speak or read Japanese, it was great because I just handed the package to the store clerk and they did everything for me in terms of the heating and the cooking of the items.
But for me, I was really big on checking all the ingredients before I bought something in the convenience store. So basically, I just used the Translate app on my phone and I took a picture and it would just translate everything straight from Japanese to English and I could read the packages perfectly fine. So any sneaky beef or pork ingredient, I was like, I can't take it, but they would let me know with that app.
So the next thing that was really cool about Japan is that you can order using a kiosk. And there are many reasons why ordering through a kiosk is very beneficial. Number one being that the kiosk will be in English, so I don't have to translate anything. This way, you know exactly what you're ordering. Number two, if your social battery is low, you don't have to talk to anybody. You just go to the kiosk and you order. And number three, a lot of times you can just pay at the kiosk as well. And this is super convenient because you literally just pay, grab your receipt, sit down, and the food will come to you.
Yeah, so sometimes the food will come to you or there'll be a screen that will tell you your ticket number. Then you just go up to the counter and grab your food and it's perfect.
So our next point is about reservations in Japan. So as we said numerous times throughout this video, Japan is the most populated city in the world.
So being that it's so populated and so many tourists come to visit, things can get very busy.
So there are many different activities that are bucket lists for a lot of different people. And you have to pick and choose what is important to you. The ones that you really want to do, you have to book weeks, if not months in advance in Japan. And I'll give you an example of some of these things that sell out pretty quickly. The Mario Karting, the Shibuya Sky, Pokemon cafes. All of these things are going to be super difficult just to walk in and enter without a reservation. Also, a lot of places, especially restaurants, are going to have long wait times. Now, what we've realized with our time in Japan is that Japan has amazing food. So I would recommend if you're waiting hours for a restaurant, just go to another restaurant because there's so many great places you can eat and you do not need to wait 2 hours to eat anywhere.
And our next point is something that was super convenient for us as Americans is that in Japan they use US outlets. So while we always pack our universal travel adapter, it was really convenient that we could just plug in our electronics right into the wall because they use the US outlet.
And our next point is a major money-saving tip, especially if you have kids or you want to live out your childhood fantasies here in Japan. And this is, theme parks in Japan are significantly cheaper than they are in the United States. So during our time in Osaka, we actually visited the Universal Studios. And in Florida, it's like $150 and more to enter Universal Studios, but in Japan, we did it each for under $60 per person. And we got to experience the Super Nintendo Mario World, and it was an amazing experience. Also, Disneyland is so much cheaper here than it is in Florida or in Los Angeles, and they even have the Disney Sea, which is a unique park as well.
Last tip that we have is that there's way more to Japan than just visiting Tokyo.
So Tokyo is the capital city, and we spent the most time in Tokyo as well. But to be honest with you guys, my favorite city was outside of Tokyo. It was actually in Kyoto, and this is what I envisioned Japan to be. We also had unique experiences in Mount Fuji, feeding deer in Nara, bowing with them. We visited Osaka and went on our first Ferris wheel and did a river cruise. And there's still so much that we did not visit that we have to come back to Japan to do next time.
So stay tuned because we have a whole lot of Japan content coming in the next few weeks.
So thank you guys so much for checking out our video. We truly appreciate you guys, especially if you made it all the way to the end, because you could be anywhere in the world, but you're sitting down watching this video with us. So thank you guys. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one.